I'm going to be reading a letter from the Lubavitch Rebbe. This is because I didn't do a video. This is my Friday video, even though today was Sunday, and I just didn't have time on Saturday night, or I wasn't on my phone or whatever. He writes in 1973 or 5733, the Hebrew year. Perhaps it's the opportunity to re-emphasize several basic points. Those well-meaning persons who felt impelled to interpret certain passages in the Torah differently from the time-honored traditional interpretation did so only in the mistaken belief that the Torah view on the age of the world, etc., was at variance with science. Otherwise, they would not have sought new interpretations of the Torah. In the Torah, the apologetic literature, at least the substantial part of it that was created as a result of this misconception, relied on the principle that, as in the case of mutar leshanot mipnei darchei shalom, it is permissible to change for the sake of peace. It's interesting, leshanot, like my name, Shana. There was no harm in making an innocent verbal concession to science if it would be helpful in strengthening commitment to Torah and mitzvot, the commandments of many. At the bottom of this attitude was the mistaken belief that scientific conclusions were categorical and absolute. Parenthetically, some explanation for this attitude to science may be found in the fact pointed out in the previous letter. He writes my previous letter that the Torah accords to science a higher status of credibility than contemporary science lays claim to, as is evidence from the rule in halacha that the prohibition of chilul, desecrating Shabbos, may be waived in the opinion of a physician in the area of pikuach nefesh, which is saving a life, and many similar rulings. The crucial point, however, is that the latest conclusions of science introduced a radical change into science's own evaluation of itself, clearly defining its own limitations. Accordingly, there's nothing categorical in science. The principle of cause and effect is substituted by a probable sequence of events, etc. Furthermore, contemporary science holds that scientific judgments and descriptions do not necessarily present things as they really are. Science demands empirical, verification. Science demands empirical, verification. Conclusions are considered scientific if they have been investigated experimentally, but certainly not in relation to conditions which have never been known to mankind and cannot be duplicated. In view of all that has been said above, there is no reason whatever to believe that science, as different from scientists, can state anything definitive on something which occurred in the remote past, in the pre-dawn of history. Consequently, there's no need to seek new reinterpretations of the Torah to reconcile them with science, as stated in the beginning of the letter. Apropos of your special reference to Shabbos Bereshis, it is astonishing that those who attempted to reinterpret the six-day creation account in terms of eons fail to even mention that the contradiction of such a view with the text of a get, or the writ of divorce. It is well known how punctilious the halacha Jewish law is in regard to a get. The text of the get begins with the unequivocal dating of it according to the creation of the world. For example, in the current year, it would read Shnas Chameshes Alafim Sheva Meos Ushloshim Vishlosh Librias Olam. The year 5,733 since the creation of the world. So right now it's 5783 since the creation of the world. In the words of the Megillah, or the Scroll of Esther, which we read this week, there is one people, and their laws differ from those of any other people. May God grant that, just as in those days their people felt justly proud of their uniqueness and difference and made no attempt to reconcile their laws and customs and views with those of the people among them, among whom they were dispersed and scattered, so may every Jew now also display the same courageous spirit based on the one and the same Torah, since this Torah shall not be changed or substituted. One of the basic 13 principles of our faith is formulated by our sages with esteem and blessing. And then a few quotes from this Torah portion. This video is meant to be for Friday. It says, "You shall make it incense. Atonement before the Almighty, similar to appeasement among people. Though one may have completely forgiven another for a wrong, it's still remembered. The next time the transgression occurs, it's not forgotten so easily. The same is true of our sins, which are atoned for by means of the sacrifices. Some unpleasant odor may still remain even after the atonement. The incense offering wipes away even that small remainder." That's from the Tzemach Tzedek. And then a commentary on the Tanya, it says, "He saw the golden calf in the dancing, and Moses' anger was kindled, and he threw the tablets and broke them." That's Exodus 32:19. Now, the last one was 30:20. Okay, from this incident, we see clearly that the difference between hearing and seeing. Moses had already heard directly from God that the Jews made the golden calf. Yet it wasn't until he actually saw the calf with his own eyes that his anger was kindled. And then the Reason D'Oraita on Exodus 33:19, which is, "And I will be gracious to whom I will be gracious, and I will show mercy to whom I will show mercy." It says, the way an individual acts towards others is the way he himself will be treated by heaven. If one is merciful to his fellow man and behaves in a good and kind manner, God will be merciful toward him, even if he's not really deserving. "And I'll be gracious to whom I will be gracious." God will act accordingly to the person who always says, "I'll be gracious," and will be merciful to the person who always says, "I will be merciful." And I would like to share a story. It was Reb Hillel Partitcher's custom to travel around the villages surrounding Kherson to visit the Jews who lived there. The settlements were comprised of all types of Jews. There were the scholars who looked forward to Reb Hillel's learned discourses, and there were the simple folk who understood not a word of his Hasidic teachings, regardless of their level of learning. However, all those Jews had been instilled from birth with certain precious Hasidic traits. They loved to do a favor for their fellow Jews. They prayed with true love and fear of God, and they lived in general harmony with one another. Reb Hillel was a man who brimmed with an overflowing love of his fellow Jews. He was also an extremely humble man. When he looked at even the most simple, uneducated Jew, he saw only his pure soul, his neshama, shining through. He never focused on the grubby exterior, and when he approached common people, he never exalted himself over them. It's no wonder that they loved him too. His arrival was greeted with great excitement in every town and village, and everyone would drop what they were doing and run out and greet him. Reb Hillel was one of the most highly respected Hasidim. On each of his trips, he took the opportunity to explain the lofty ideas expressed in Hasidic discourse to his listeners. Of course, since Reb Hillel was one of the greatest intellects of the movement, the villagers often comprehended very little of what he said. Once Reb Hillel arrived in a village, so many people came out to hear him speak that there was no room in the entire village large enough to accommodate everyone. There was no choice but for Reb Hillel to address the crowd outdoors. The small street was filled to capacity, with men, women, children, all waiting in great anticipation for Reb Hillel to begin. As he spoke, Reb Hillel noticed many in the large crowd were weeping, and it dawned on him the reason for their tears was that with their limited education, they were unable to comprehend his words. Their tears bespoke their terrible pain in not being able to understand the profound insights of the Hasidus Reb Hillel was discussing. When he finished the discourse, Reb Hillel told the people, to create a letter in the Sefer Torah, 3 things are required: ink, quill, and a parchment. If there's no parchment, the letter cannot exist. Even if the scribe possesses the finest quill and the best ink, only when the simple Jews who are compared to the parchment gather to learn Torah, the Torah scroll can be completed. Reb Hillel continued, there are no words to describe the tremendous joy created in the highest heavens when this happens. Now that you, my dear friends, have come here, the Torah can be completed. The previous Rebbe concluded the Farbrengen with the words, the same situation is true for us today. No words can describe the great tumult in heaven as a result of our holy gathering. Not only are our physical bodies participating in the celebration, but our souls are also rejoicing.